I think this Cenk clip is pretty great. Cenk Uygur of TYT, my former employer, went on Piers Morgan, and I found this to be, a really passionate plea. And when I first started getting interested in politics when I was a teenager, Cenk's coverage of Israel-Palestine is really what changed my perspective on that issue. He's always been very strong on this, despite some of the differences that we've had I've had with some of his takes recently. This is a very strong kind of moral case that he makes and on Piers Morgan.
I think that Morgan, it's like Cenk Uygur uncensored. Like, is he usually censored? Yeah,
right. It's hilarious. And Cenk does not hold back. And Hassan did a great job on Friday. We never ended up getting to play that. Maybe we'll get to it tomorrow or something like that. I know it's a little bit behind the times, but this part where Cenk talks about how Americans and some people and people in the West, white people who are very comfortable, not just white people, but people in the West who are comfortable and don't have an understanding of what it is like to be bombed, what that does to someone's body versus a shooting or a fire or, I mean, other things that we would be more familiar with. I mean, we have mass shootings regularly in this country, and I think the general population understands what that looks like. But do they understand what it is like to be bombed? And Cenk makes this point, which I think is really key on Piers Morgan.
Yes, you need to get those hostages out. So now let's look at I'm going to suggest what to actually do. I'm going to be constructive. But first, let's look at the unconstructive solution that Israel had. Dropping bombs on residential buildings. 50 ambulances have been hit. 10 out of 25 hospitals don't operate anymore. The incubators are about to run out of energy. There's 45 babies that might die today. The parents I just read on CNN are writing the names of the kids on their calves, on their legs, so that if they are killed in a bombing and they're mutilated, they could find their bodies. Imagine writing the name of your child on their legs so that you could find them in the rubble after Israel or any government drops a bomb on them. And I need the West to understand something. Bombs kill people. And do you know how they kill people? They incinerate them alive, or their heads explode. So what happened in Israel was a disaster and disgusting. But you have to be equally honest and equally outraged at the immorality of incinerating babies and grandmothers and aunts and uncles, which is what we're doing right now. America cannot keep sending aid for death and destruction. Enough of the occupation. End it today. End it today. It's monstrous. Okay, I'm going to get to the constructive solution.
I completely understand your passion and your anger. I completely get this. I, like you, want to see some resolution at the end of this horror that we're witnessing. How do you get rid of Hamas if you don't do it the way Israel are currently doing it? How do you actually eradicate what has become a nihilistic ISIS-style terror group who've quite deliberately, in my estimation, committed an outrage of such appalling scale that they knew that this would goad Israel into this kind of response? So why they did that, what is motivating it, who might be putting them up to it, who's helped them prepare for this, these are all questions we don't know the answers to yet. But it seems to me that Israel could, if it's not careful, be being lured into a massive trap here. And I hope that is not the case. But I'm curious, how do you get rid of Hamas if you don't do it the way Israel is currently doing it, albeit with horrific collateral damage in the face of thousands of innocent Palestinians being caught up in the bombing?
Yeah. So let me give you a short-term answer, a long-term answer. And a lot of people are not going to like these, but these are realistic ways that you minimize civilian casualties. You do what America did with the Osama bin Laden raid. We didn't go drop a nuke on Pakistan. We didn't go destroy 6,000 residential buildings in the middle of Pakistan. We sent in special forces. Is it more dangerous to the special forces? Of course. That's the point of special forces. Try to find the hostages. Does it look like Israel Israel's trying to find the hostages. If I have a family member that's a hostage, I'm disgusted by what Netanyahu's doing now. How do you know they're not in the buildings you're dropping bombs on?
We have seen a shift here with what the point is. Is the point to free hostages, or is it to destroy Hamas? Those are contradictory, and you'll see a lot of frankly pro-Israel celebrities say you don't want the hostages. Well, actually, it's people like Ben Shapiro and the Israeli.
It's the IDF.
Yes, exactly.
The Times of Israel.
Yeah.
Let's read this quote again. This is about the reticence. The IDF is leaking stuff to the Times of Israel saying they're unhappy that the frickin' ground invasion is being delayed because of the hostages. The Times of Israel learned that 16 days after after 16 days of airstrikes, the IDF has told the government that it is fully prepared for a ground offensive in the Gaza Strip and believes it can achieve the goals set out for it, even at the risk of heavy casualties to soldiers and amid ongoing attacks by Hezbollah in the north. But the military fears that the government may not ever give the order to begin the ground offensive or postpone it for a lengthy period. Should the army need to move its focus to the northern front instead of Gaza, it is confident that it could pivot within just a few days. The IDF has already heavily bolstered the Lebanon border, but most forces remain near Gaza ahead of the expected ground offensive. I read too much, but regarding the 222 confirmed hostages held by Hamas and other terror groups in the Gaza Strip, the military has been preparing for the possibility of rescue operations amid the ground offensive, according to information seen by the Times of Israel. The army is concerned that further hostage releases by Hamas could lead the political leadership to delay a ground incursion or even halt it midway. On Friday night, Hamas released an American mother and daughter. According to some reports, this contributed to a postponement of the ground offensive in light of hopes that more could be freed. Because more could be freed. Because the more bombs that you drop in this incredibly highly concentrated area, 2.4 million people live in a strip of land that's the size of Detroit, which has 600,000 people in it. Do you think that the hostages are safe in that situation? That's the point Cenk's making here.
Yeah.
So,
the IDF doesn't want them safe. They want to see them added to the death toll.
They are champing at the bit for a ground invasion because they want to kill Palestinians. That's what they want. And the hostages are secondary. If the Israeli government was principled in its stance and caring about the hostages, they would not have dropped more bombs in like an 8 or 9 day period than we did in an entire year of our first year in Afghanistan. Okay? They would not be doing that on that small concentrated strip of land. Let's hear a little bit more of this. But and then
also, you want to defend yourself? Don't be settling. Don't be splitting your force because you got to go steal people's houses.
Yeah,
disgusting.
And then there's more the increased violence in the West Bank and on the Lebanon border is also incredibly concerning. But when Piers calls them a nihilistic ISIS-style terror group,
it's IDF.
That is an IDF propaganda point. Now, this is the furthest thing from a defense of Hamas. What Hamas did is atrocious.
No, I sorry to be clear. I was saying the IDF is terroristic. Like, we're seeing all these bombings near.
Right, but this is what they're trying to do. The baby story that came out right away that has not been confirmed at this point.
I haven't seen a 0 to 3 year old confirmed death. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I'm going to look that up now.
We do not know at this point. It is fog of war. But Biden did have to backtrack on that statement, and I think that is a piece of evidence. It still could totally be possible, okay? But that imagery was meant to evoke ISIS in order to get countries like the United States to feel like Hamas is this international threat that is hell-bent on blowing up other Western democracies, that it's about a larger spread of Islamic jihad as opposed to what Hamas is, which is an extremist group that has been funded and bolstered by Israel's own admission, by Israel, to represent a people that have been completely immiserated, have no resources, live in the largest open-air prison in the world, and they have quite specific stated goals of territory, and it's in relationship with Israel, not this broad global jihad that they're trying to evoke with this. That is IDF propaganda to that degree. It doesn't do anything to minimize the atrocities that we're talking about here. And I'm like, when I think about what those hostages are going through right now and what those people at the music festival went through, it like breaks my heart in two. But we have to be precise here. And so the eradication thing, it's just another excuse for more bloodlust, but keep going.
How do you know they're not in the tunnels you're dropping bombs on? How do you know they're not in the hospitals you're dropping bombs on? So this, if you want the hostages rescued, every rational human being can agree this is not the way to do it. This is the way to do death and destruction for the sake of death and destruction. It's collective punishment. It's genocide against Palestinians, and the world has to speak out. So my way is not pleasant either. It involves a lot of folks dying on both sides. I understand that. Those are super hard choices. But go find Hamas. Go find the hostages. Go rescue them instead of wantonly, indiscriminately killing after killing. And let's be honest, when you drop a bomb and a kid's head explodes and a grandmother is incinerated, that is terrorism. Killing 3 times as many civilians as Hamas is terrorism. And it is the same if it is done by a government. Send in as many special forces as you got. We should send in whatever you got to actually do the job at hand instead of what Netanyahu is doing, which is to kill these people to what? Send a message. And think about how unrealistic that is. And
Sorry, I just want to add in there's folks who still want to act like this is asymmetric and we need to be balanced about this sort of thing. And I am not supportive of Hamas and their strategy. But I will put out a Nelson Mandela quote. This is from The Long Walk to Freedom, in which, in another part of Long Walk to Freedom, Mandela talks about why the ANC avoided terrorism because it loses PR in addition to being morally difficult for the people carrying it out. It's not good for PR. But nonetheless, here's what he said. A freedom fighter learns the hard way that it is the oppressor who defines the nature of the struggle, and the oppressed is often left no recourse but to use methods that mirror those of the oppressor. At a point, one can only fight fire with fire. And so when Cenk calls, look, I'm willing to call what Hamas does terrorism, because just objectively speaking, like these sorts of actions, taking people hostage that aren't, and granted, like, of course, there are some settlers who might have AR-15s or whatever that know exactly what their position in that is, but just taking for granted, like the innocent civilians thing, that is terrorism, right? Mm-hmm. We need to, but the reason, but also Israel and these sorts of bombings, and then also lying about the stuff. And we're going to hit this hospital. We're going to call up these hospitals and say, you have a few more hours to get out of here. That is terrorism. Yeah. This is terrorism too. Right. And like and that's what Mandela's saying. And that is like the stage here is, it would be great if there was an MLK or even a Mandela and the MK, I guess, that were more.
Mandela was on the watch list, the terrorist watch list in the United States since 2008. Since 2008.
I think a lot of people might be overly, laundering the sort of difficulties that were going on in South Africa.
Yes.
We're collaborators of the apartheid regime too. But yeah, like this is the point. And like, yes, like if we want to condemn Hamas, we also have to talk about like what Cenk is answering, like how do we get rid of the conditions that led to a terror organization that is okay with terror tactics being the main representative. And it's not because of something inherent to Palestinians' brains or their religion. It's because of the situations they've been put in.
Exactly. And another thing to note, and he speaks about like the special operation, which I think is fair. In terms of of Israel going after Hamas, that would be a reasonable response. But just to note, off Matt's point, Mandela vocal about the freedom of the Palestinian people as well.
Yeah.